Penelope didn't feel the pull to consume, but she consumed anyway. Just to give herself something to look forward to. But oddly, her consumption only took place in certain stores she recognized and felt at home in, stores that really didn't need her business and didn't really give anything back to the community. Penelope didn't know why she thought of the tomato plants the Rogers used to plant in their backyard. Edward Rogers was the CEO of Midwestern Cars, and Penelope's mother was his personal lawyer. His third wife enjoyed gardening in her spare time. 15 years apart in age, Edward and his wife had little in common except sex parts, and Edward aged out of shape and was not really a turn-on for his new wife, or anyone else for that matter. Edward's then-wife, Christine, had just graduated college and was looking for a job. She couldn't stomach having to beg her new husband for money, because he always became mean when she asked for clothes or gas money, or a few dollars to go out to eat with her friends. She had no real job experience, so she got no offers. Depressed and lonely, she often would grow vegetables on a plot of land close to the estate in town and country that the gardener designed for her. She was obsessed with those tomato plants and often spent the whole summer tending to them in one way or another. Penelope, who often wondered that huge mansion and its grounds alone, found herself constantly going back to Christine's little garden. To her, it was the only place in the house that had any heart. The huge green balls fascinated Penelope, and she couldn't wait for them to turn red and become real tomatoes. She could just taste the sweetness of the fruit. One afternoon, when Christina was at a job interview, the gardener was hacking away at the tomato trees. When Penelope asked him why, he said he was given express orders by Mr. Rogers to take out all these weeds and replace them with a flower bed that matched all the others. Mulch and gladiolus in the place of the interesting garden that grew tomatoes, asparagus, basil, marjoram, mint, rosemary, and arugula. The flowers seemed so empty in comparison, almost as if the sight of them resembled that of a void. The ground never could sustain the flowers either. They kept dying. 5 minutes?
Sure. Yeah, it's been 10 minutes.
Okay, it's been 10 minutes. Okay. Christine didn't seem to care. I got through a lot. I'm surprised. Okay, Christine didn't seem to care that her garden was destroyed, but Penelope wouldn't really know. Christine always regarded Penelope as one of her husband's staff, and therefore wouldn't even look at her. She didn't realize that she was just as much of staff as Penelope's mother, and soon enough she was replaced. A year later, Edward divorced her and left her with nothing. He was dating her best friend throughout the whole divorce. Years later, Penelope would hear about post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition usually found in victims of war. She wondered if seeing that tomato plant being pulled out from its roots might have created a similar type of shock, even if, in comparison, it almost sounded silly. The shock of looking at that empty flower bed, so much like the others, made her feel so betrayed. She couldn't understand why she felt it so personally, because it wasn't even about her. She stood at the foot of the bed for a while, saw Christine walk up and immediately turn around, then walked back to the house. She never spoke about it to anyone, then or since. Penelope's thoughts were interrupted by the change of the stoplight. She suddenly became irritated with herself. Why am I thinking about this? It's the past. It won't help me now. Penelope did not want to think of her childhood, which, although not traumatic or heart-wrenching, was often extremely lonely. She did have one friend, though, who she knew since she was 8. His name was Jefferson, and he lived next door to the Rogers. Jefferson's families moved in shortly after the garden was cleared. His parents were always working, and Penelope found him one afternoon sauntering through Rogers' yard, as if he owned the place. Excited to see a child her age, even if he was a boy, she approached him and started talking about the St. Louis Cardinals. Penelope loved the Cardinals during her childhood. Even though her disappointment with big money of baseball grew as she got older, baseball, at the time, was the only way she could bond with her real father, who showed little interest in her. Jefferson did not seem very interested in the Cardinals, but befriended Penelope anyway. Jefferson, as it would turn out, was actually a quiet kid with few friends. He thought more about what he would be when he grew up than what he was now, and spent most of his time preparing for childhood. Instead of playing on the States, Jefferson would ask his nanny to take Penelope to the library. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. The Midwestern Automotive Building had been constructed during the 80s boom and defied zoning ordinances by building 20 feet above the St. Louis Arch. At the time, when corporate vanguard standing up against community standards was looked upon as bravery and strength, the glass structure was considered a sign of American spirit, and soon descent toward the structure and the money it brought to the crumbling St. Louis downtown community dissipated. Whenever Penelope looked at that building, she thought more about its vulnerability than its so-called strength. The glass structure seemed so fragile. It looked as if a strong wind would topple it. The buildings, which were built to look like the World Trade Center in New York, could be so destructive when they fell, Penelope thought. A large portion of the downtown community could be destroyed. Penelope often wondered as she entered the Midwest Automotive Building what quality of wood went into the rafters that held up the floors, which were tiled with heavy granite. She imagined Midwest Automotive would employ the same methods it used to build cars. It would cut costs whenever possible. The flimsiness of the building always frightened her, and her nauseated feeling worsened as she took the elevator up to the 29th floor where she worked. She would distract herself on the way up to her desk by looking at the ridiculous pictures of happy employees on the job with corporate slogans written on top like, "From the top of the Mississippi to the bottom, our cars will get you there." The employees in all the pictures were white. The company didn't even bother to get a few novel black people to make them look more diverse. They didn't care if they were sued. Judges rarely held companies responsible for racism anymore. Racism was over. The employees also seemed so painfully white. No tomato trees here, only gladiolas, dressed in painfully monotonous beige suits or polo shirts. Penelope's mom got her a job a year after coming back with her boss, Edward Rogers. Edward, who was now in his mid-50s, had a glossy forehead and huge stomach. He had grown uglier with age. Edward's entire face seemed to slouch downward, as if he was never satisfied, and his irritated temperament made it impossible for him to keep a secretary. That is, until Penelope started working for him. Penelope, who had no prior work experience. Over?
It's been 15 minutes, but...
Okay, I'll just finish up this paragraph, unless people want me to continue. Penelope, who had no prior work experience, had no choice but to work for this impossible man. Because her only reference would be an angry, dissatisfied asshole, it seemed to her that her future would be fixed. Okay, that's it. That's part of the first chapter. So it goes up from there. It's really depressing in the beginning.